What is up, everybody? It's Sam over at the Foot Whisperer Reflexology Institute here in Tampa, Florida. Surprise foot reading video. I just had the most amazing pair of feet sent to me via email, and I was just so inspired to create this foot reading video for you. I can't wait. There are some new markers that we've never shown before in these videos. I'm just so freaking out. I can't wait to show you. So, as always, if you would like to send in your foot pictures to sam@footwhisperer.com, I'll definitely let you know what I think. And if they're super awesome, I will put them into a video like this one. Also, I'll talk about this a little bit more at the end, but the foot reading online certification course is live, and I'll have more details about that to come. But before then, let's get to these pictures. I can't wait to show you. Screen share, full screen, da da da. All right, here we are, F5. Look at these feet. Look at them. It's amazing. Like, I literally just got these in my inbox. Thank you so much. You know who you are. Every time that I look at them, I see more things that I want to talk about. So let's get to the markers first and foremost, but so much to talk about here. Okay, so blowing them up real quick. Let me throw out a marker that I actually didn't circle. So this little guy right here, yes, on the left foot, there is a freckle, a birthmark. And whenever we see a birthmark, we know from previous videos, a freckle like this indicates that the nerves have been kind of singed in that area. And when we think of that medial arch as representing the spine in reflexology and foot reading theory, this would be about halfway down the thoracic spine. So if there are 12 vertebrae in the thoracic spine, this would be about T6. It's also towards the bottom of the rib cage. And that area, more so on the left side, would definitely be giving this person trouble. The muscles and bone alignment would probably be glitching, like they constantly feel like they have a rib out of place, or they might even develop some spinal curvature in that area, not as severe as a scoliosis, but definitely more of a hunch, a kyphosis, or they feel like they constantly need to just pop or snap that part of their back, that kind of mid T6 thoracic vertebra. So that's one thing that I really wanted to throw out there because I did not circle it. Every time I look at these feet, I'm seeing something new. It's absolutely amazing. Let's talk about the next marker. Okay, so notice the contrast between the ball of the foot on the right foot and the ball of the foot on the left foot. There's a little bit of trickery with the lighting, and that's totally okay. But what we notice on the right foot is that there's more callousing. What we notice on the right foot, yes. There is more callousing on the right foot. And the right ball of the foot represents the chest area in foot reading. But here's something that I'd really like to throw out there, and this is something that I haven't really talked about before. The sole of the foot represents the front of the body, the front side of the body, versus the dorsal aspect, the top of the foot, represents the back of the body. So when we think of this is really important in terms of musculature. So when we think of horizontal zone 2 as the chest area, that ball of the foot representing the chest, lung, shoulder complex, the ball of the foot really gets us into that pec tissue. So on the right side, there seems to be a lot of pec muscle hardness, almost as if they injured that kind of pec area a long time ago, and it's just the fascia has hardened over. As opposed to the left side, we can definitely see some callousing there, but it's not as pronounced. And in that same area, we have another validating marker to let us know that dysfunction is present, because we have this really interesting arc of a line on the right side. You can see it almost perfectly surrounding the callousing. And this is a very interesting marker because when we get towards the bottom of the ball of the foot, we get into the diaphragm guideline. And the diaphragm is that really important structural space that helps us with breathing. And when we see any kind of lining in the tissues of the feet, which we'll, as you can see, talk about extensively, in the next couple markers, whenever we see lining, it's an indication of breakage, weakness, separation in the tissue. So we're really seeing a lot of very interesting signs for this right pec area and very much kind of right shoulder complex as being compromised, almost as if it's not like this person wouldn't be able to raise their arm up very high without pain, or the shoulder is always clicking. Like there are multiple markers here for both hardened tissue and weakened nerve innervation. So that right shoulder is definitely the first area that I would personally be concerned about if I was seeing this client paired with the birthmark on the other side. I mean, there's some serious cross compensation that's happening. But let's talk about what this all means mentally and emotionally. So as we know, foot reading tells us that we can use reflexology theory to map the physical body onto the feet, but then we can also look at the feet from a mental emotional aspect. And this is where it gets really interesting because the right side represents the past, the left side represents the present. And since the callousing and lining is more present on the right side, we can tell that this person has had some very strenuous and also very guarded experiences emotionally in the past. I say emotionally because the ball of the foot is horizontal zone 2, that emotional space of the foot. So whenever something happens in the ball of the foot, it's always going to be heart related, not just physical reflex, but also the metaphor of the internal heart. So, but that contrast between right side and left side, because there's not as much callousing present on the left side, this means that the stress has somewhat lifted. The issue is no longer physically present, but the body is still holding on to it. It's still having to shed those excess layers of rigidity and weakness that developed over that chronic long-term period of emotional distress. So just something really interesting to kind of counterbalance is not just the reflex that you're looking at in the moment on that one foot, but also the difference between right side and left side. Okay. So marker number 2. Okay, this is going to blow your mind. I'm serious. Notice how on the right foot the lines are horizontal, and then notice on the left foot how the lines have gone vertical. I can't even describe how powerful this visualization is, because who looks at feet on a daily basis besides me as a foot reader? But I mean, when you see lining that literally changes directions, there are so many postural and mental emotional signifiers of this that we just, the interpretations are amazing for this marker, and we've never seen this on a foot reading video before. So I'm so thrilled to bring this forward. Okay, so first and foremost, we have these horizontal lines, definitely in more horizontal zone 4, although we can see some cracking and lining in horizontal zone 3, kind of where those two circles are intersecting on the right foot. We can see some lining indicating some liver weakness, but again, with the chronic patterns of emotional stress, tends to drain physical resources. So that's normal. Like I wouldn't classify that as one of my top 3 per se, but it is significant. Also means that most of the stress was taking place at work and then affecting him emotionally, or her, depending. Anonymous. Well, we'll see in the next picture. It's definitely a him. But okay, back to horizontal zone 4. So when we see a horizontal lining like this, this is an indicator that the muscles of the lower leg, which form a sling around the middle of the foot to help create the arch, they are pulling, okay? They are pulling horizontally, creating that tension pattern of horizontal lines. What this means is that there is great low back tension on the right side. Now, how did I get to that? Well, we have in vertical zone 1 in line with the big toe, and horizontal zone 4 in line with that more proximal arch, that space of the arch that's nearest to the heel. We have those horizontal kind of pulling structures. And that's really what lets us know, because that is the lower back reflex area, that the lower back on the right side is pulling just a little bit too hard. This really makes sense as far as this entire right side having been through the ringer, not just above in the horizontal zone 2 chest shoulder space, but now we're also seeing lower body issues here, which could actually be due to the chronic pulling of that right shoulder area. So definitely right side low back issues. More on the weaker side, we're not seeing the callus buildup. We're not even seeing a lot of fluid here. we're just seeing that indentation, that pulling effect. So pulling on the right side low back. But let's move over to the left side, because this is phenomenal. So notice how on the right side, it looks like the skin is pulling horizontally, kind of like it's being stretched or pulled towards that muscle. Here, it's gone totally flaccid. You can even see the ripples or waves, like there's just too much skin. There's an excess of tissue. The pulling has completely gone. The skin has settled. And all of that vertical orientation means that there's not as much pull. In fact, there's a weakness in the tissues on the left side. So the left low back is definitely weak while the right low back is tight. But notice how that pooling of skin is really going deeper into horizontal zone 4. It's not really staying on that medial arch and the direct low back reflexes. It's moving deeper into the lower GI space. So here's where I'm going to pull out a couple interpretations that might blow your mind, but I will definitely explain them, so stay tuned. Okay, so these markers together let me know that there has been a drastic physical change in terms of diet and weight. How I know that is because whenever we see excess skin, it's because the body is weak, it hasn't been able to tonify, and on just a change standpoint, what normally happens when we lose a lot of weight or undergo a drastic dietary change is there's a lot of skin left over that needs to physically be broken back down and assimilated into the body. If you've ever rapidly lost weight, you notice that the stretch marks come out. You notice that you tend to have just layers of not necessarily fat or muscle, but skin. And that's very much what we're seeing here. So more so in the digestive area, we're seeing a tremendous detox weight loss marker that's giving us an idea that the lower GI and the digestive tract has not been able to keep up with the releasing that it's been going through lately. Another interesting comparison is the horizontal stretch marks on the right foot give us this idea that there's this pulling tension and somewhat blocking of the lower GI nerve innervation through the low back, versus when we look at the left side, this vertical tissue orientation, the extra skin, it almost looks like everything is being released downward, like the pipes are open, for lack of a better word. And this really is significant. We can even see in horizontal zone 3 above this area how the lining has totally decreased. We can see almost a star shape on the right foot, but on the left foot, we only see a small little vertical slit. So the stomach has definitely calmed down, and the lower GI has released a lot of maybe even stagnant bowel would be an interesting way to interpret that. But as with any marker, we need to strike a balance. So on the right side, there was too much tension. On the left side, there's a little bit too much looseness. So what I would definitely recommend when seeing these markers side by side is this idea of the digestive system needs to calm down and find a middle ground. So not too tight, not too loose, but somewhere in the middle. And so with the drastic change that's been occurring both emotionally and now we're seeing physically, this individual really needs to get back into a steady routine to make sure that the body can catch up and self-adjust. Okay, now let's start to tinker with these two in terms of emotional aspects, mental emotional aspects in terms of foot reading. So we know that the right side represents the past, and in horizontal zone 4, this pulling could have been really strong family relationship dynamics that were constricting a little bit too tightly, causing a little bit too much pressure to build up, which may have even resulted in a manifest low back spasm. But then we have this hyperlooseness that's in horizontal zone 4. This is a little bit concerning because it means that this person went from a really strict family dynamic or a tighter family dynamic to having way too much freedom in the relationship space. So what I would definitely suggest for this individual is to make sure that they at least have a top 5 that they can really lean on as a support structure, because it seems like the physical tissues as well as the internal person attached to these feet is needing some of that extra support in the family and relationship space as of right now. So physically, they've done some serious detoxing, but also relationship-wise, they've done some serious detoxing. So as with any kind of release, we need to bolster with nutrients in order to compensate. Physically, that would take the place of making sure that they're eating regular meals, that the meals are really dense and nutritious, but also easy to digest, like soups and stews, really high vegetable content. But then also from a mental emotional standpoint, that they have people that they can talk with, share experiences with, and that they can really make sure to get that reality check from every once in a while in the midst of all of this change. Okay, so these are the markers that I really wanted to show on the plantar surface. Now let's move to the dorsal surface. Okay, hold the phone. We've got some stuff to talk about here. Some stuff that we've covered in other videos, and then some sharp contrasts that I wanted to point out. Let's start with the contrast. So what you'll notice is that there is this blankness on the dorsal surface of the foot in horizontal zone 2. So on the top side of the ball of the foot, underneath the toes, when comparing that to the other tissue structure, like the toes look slightly cramped, not too bad, but just cramped enough to provide contrast. And then when we get into horizontal zone 3 and 4 on the dorsal aspect, when we get down on the foot, we start to get into that deep forest of veining, which we'll definitely talk about. But in between, in horizontal zone 2, like, it's smooth sailing, which is interesting because on the underside of the feet, that is definitely not the case. We found some serious baggage on the right side, and on the top side, it's not even present. We're not seeing any signifier of what's underneath. So this is very, very significant. This means that physically the tension is definitely held in the front of the body, because the balls of the feet on the plantar surface represent that front of the chest area, versus the dorsal aspect of the balls of the feet represent the upper back area. So if I were a body worker, I would definitely be more focused on the pec complex and the front chest, as opposed to working through maybe even the deep rotators or the traps or rhomboids. I would be very focused on opening the front body. But then mentally and emotionally, we have this really interesting dynamic of, if this person was wearing flip-flops, you wouldn't be able to see what's underneath. You would only see this smooth, calm surface on the top. This lets us know that even though there was so much physical and mental emotional hardship that was being chronically undertaken, this person never broke a sweat on the surface. They felt the internal discomfort, but they never really let it show. They never let that pain physically register on their face as they were going through all of this. It was just bubbling underneath the surface, which on one hand can be a very useful defense mechanism, but with all of the change that this person is going through, I would really ask them to make sure that they have that top 5 group of people that they can share those experiences with, and not keep all of that internal tension and chronic kind of fatigue bottled up for any longer, because now is the time to really let all of that out, to physically get some blood into other areas of the foot, but then also to let that mental emotional stress truly lift through the aid of others. Okay, now let's get into some fun markers. First and foremost, notice this little red spot. Okay, some of you might be like, well, Sam, it's because the shoes. Well, then I would say, why isn't it on the other side? Huh? You got an answer for that? I didn't think so. Okay, so let's talk about it. This is the dorsal bone bump that I've talked about in one of my more popular YouTube videos. When the proximal head of the first metatarsal, and that's a lot of anatomy, don't worry about it, there's not going to be a quiz. When this area of the foot gets irritated or the bone starts to rise, it immediately lets me know that they're developing anemic tendencies and that their digestive system has become irritated, which is exactly what we saw on the undersurface. We saw drastic digestive change. So on the left side, definitely a confirming marker letting us know that, hey, this person digestive-wise really needs to get their game back on track, and they need to calm down some of this massive movement that's occurring. But then also, when we think from a mental emotional standpoint, This is halfway between horizontal zone 3 and 4, and it's a red spot, meaning fire, inflammation, and irritation. It's also in between vertical zone 1 and 2, or in line with the big toe and second toe. It's kind of halfway in between those two landmarks. So what this means altogether is we have some crossroads that are happening in this person's life. It's in between thoughts and opinions and feelings and emotions, but it's also in between those thoughts and feelings and opinions and emotions, thoughts and opinions, feelings and emotions, and how that is affecting both their career and their relationships. So with all of the massive change that's happened in this person's life, they're starting to show up this little bit of friction on the surface, which we know is definitely a lot more underneath the surface. But everybody is starting to see how the career aspect, the relationship aspect, and how they're thinking and feeling about this whole situation starting to get a little bit red hot, with this person's tendency to really keep things close to the vest and really not show any of that undercurrent of stress. For it to actually start to bubble to the surface is a little bit interesting, because it means that things have really come to a head. So this could be a good sign, means that the person is starting to show some of that and release some of that internal stress, but it could mean that the ropes are getting a little bit too tight as well, and that the person really needs to make sure that they batten down the hatches and not get burned from all of the movement, both on a mental and emotional level, but also on a career and relationship level. Don't burn the bridges. Okay, the next one. Okay, so let's talk about this forest of superficial veining. So when we see superficial veining on the tops of the feet, or veining anywhere where the vessels have literally risen to the surface, this is a very interesting marker. It's a water marker, for those of you that just watched my webinar on elements of a symptom. The water marker indicates hypersensitivity. So physically, that means that the structures are definitely more sensitive to stimulus. So they might be physically sensitive to touch, but also they will tend to get irritated quickly if they're overused and abused, which we'll talk about the physical aspect in a minute. But normally I flag this as a very emotional marker, because it means that the person is outwardly very sensitive. So they come across as the shoulder to cry on. They're very approachable, almost meek in nature would be the best way to describe them. They have that teddy bear complex to them. They're definitely one of those people that you just feel comfortable around because they're a very good listener. And this is true very much in their work and their relationships, because we're in horizontal zone 3, horizontal zone 4. So they've really been the ear that people come to in order to vocalize some of their problems and concerns, both professionally and personally. Physically, this is a very interesting marker for this individual to have, because it means that there's hypersensitivity in terms of nerve innervation to the digestive system, which could have been caused by the massive detox, but has probably been there for longer than that. What I'm going to say is, like, if we think of the nerves starting in the spine and then branching and innervating the various organs and structures, as well as the musculature in that back body, we can see a lot of that hypersensitivity, that watery nature to that part of the body. Okay, and last but not least, let's talk about the toenail. So we've talked about this toenail shape in previous videos. This is the jack of all trades toenail, because it is wider than it is long. So we can see it's not very deep, it's not very long, but it is very wide. And this lets me know that this person is a fact collector. They tend to know a lot about everything, or rather a little about everything. They don't really know a lot about one particular thing. They tend to be very good at Jeopardy in that way. They're just always rattling off a story or something that they read or something that they saw. They have an anecdote or a answer for a wide variety of questions, ranging from zoology to aeronautics. Like, they just collect facts. This makes them very, very lethal in a work setting, because they tend to be problem solvers, drawing from their rich base of knowledge, but they are not specialists by any means. So when things start to get a little bit too technically complicated, they have to bow out, because they know a little about a lot of things, but they don't go very deep with one thing in particular. But that also lends towards their strengths, so that's a really interesting thing. But let's also take a look at that white spot on the right toenail. So notice how that is not on the left. Some of you might say, well, it's just a coincidence, or maybe it's the shoes again. We already talked about the shoes excuse, people. Don't let that be an excuse. It is significant. Everything is significant within the feet. Why one side and not the other? So this really affirms to us from a story perspective, as we're building the story of this person by looking at their feet, that in the past, that right side, mentally, that big toenail, because the toenails represent the mental space, we can see some damage. We can see just a white hot spot in their minds that really left a mark. Oddly enough, if we were to zoom in, which is a little bit of an advanced technique that I talk about in my book, Foot Reading, a Reflexology Primer on Foot Assessment, when we zoom in, this is technically horizontal zone 3, vertical zone 2, meaning how their emotions affected their work. So it seems like in the past there was mentally a white hot blow up in works due to emotional conflict. You're saying, Sam, that is 100% witchcraft, and I say no to you, nay. This is completely mappable. Pick up the book, take the online course. Trust me, you'll understand the logic behind it once you know zone theory. This is part of what a foot reader does. So we're really seeing this amazing trend of physical dysfunction in the upper lower digestive, but also low back thoracic space. We're seeing irritation, probably due to a past career issue, and a lot of physical, but also internal held traumas that still need to be released, despite this person undergoing massive change recently. So that is the summary of this foot reading. I hope that was really helpful for everybody. Seems like with the comments and likes that everybody's really enjoying these videos. So let me flip around my screen real quick, and I will leave you with just one final note. Excellent. So that was a pretty extensive foot reading session. I'm so hoping that you all like that. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you thought about that latest video. We definitely went deep on a couple subjects, but what I wanted to give you a little bit more information on, I know that all of you that have been following me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, joining the Facebook group, the Foot Reading and Reflexology online community on Facebook, all of you have been asking for the online course, the online course, the online course. When's it coming out? Well, it is out. So if you are a member of the Foot Reading and Reflexology online community, you already got the early bird registration link. The early bird registration link will drop publicly on Monday, but if you want a sneak preview, you can go into the group and get that ahead of everybody else. But the online certification course to become a certified foot reading practitioner through me and my program and my lineage is available right now through the online school. And that will drop publicly. I'll put a video out about that soon, but you can check out the online school as well as the Facebook group to get the advanced registration in the description below. And I will leave you with that nugget. I'm sure we'll be doing another live webinar soon, so stay tuned for those. Those are always fun. And until next time, my tagline that everybody loves so much, may the feet be with you.